Today's show is focused on the 250 Nikola Badger pickup trucks that paid the $5,000 for reservations. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So one of the things that's kind of happened is that over the last, let's say, 4 years, we've actually done more shows in Nikola, I think, than anyone else. And the result has been that we've had a lot of people start watching us as Nikola went public and continues on. And we appreciate your viewership, and we'll work to introduce ideas that allow you a chance to get to know the situation better. We have Wagner in our background with Ride of the Valkyries. I wanted to also note that when I started on Nikola, as I heard the name and then I realized it was Nikola Tesla, my initial reaction was, wow, this is great. There's another company that's coming up. They're going to be in the same space as Elon Musk and company, and these individuals are going to be focused on electric trucks, which I think is awesome. So as I started doing my research, what I learned was that the headquarters at that time for Nikola was actually in Provo, Utah. And so that I thought would even be better, because if there was some Tesla affiliation while they were dealing with trucks, Tesla could deal with cars. And it would be a great symbiotic relationship, because batteries and so forth going to Provo from Reno would be painless, because it's only like 400 or 500 miles. So it might be a perfect partnership. So fast forward, as I did more research, came to find out that there was no affiliation between the two companies, and that Nikola had actually chosen the name deliberately to sort of steal some of the shine that Tesla was enjoying as it built successfully out its operations. So this brings us to my review of the Nikola pickup truck. I've been reviewing vehicles now. I started doing it in high school in the early 80s. So I've actually been kind of in the business for 30 plus years and really enjoy learning about cars. And I started off with Countach and Lamborghinis and so forth as my most interested vehicles, but have expanded from there. So in the case of the Nikola vehicle, it's our assessment that they have about 250 reservations for the vehicle. Why do we come up with this number is a great question. Well, it turns out if you look at someone's Facebook page or their funeral, there will be 250 people on average at that funeral, and same thing on Facebook. So what this then means is that we have a situation where Mr. Milton got enough money from the IPO that supports his ability to actually give 250 people that might be affiliated with him, friends or family, the $5,000 necessary to reserve the vehicle. Now, when the vehicle was introduced, we were confident that one of two things would occur. Either A, we would have an announcement of a large number of vehicles that have been ordered and are in the process of being produced, or B, we'd hear nothing, which meant that there were slim to no orders for that. Now, I'd have to say that it's clear based on his reaction to the after announcement and all the press efforts he made that that number is actually slim to none. And so when we throw out that 250 number, that means Mr. Milton and his mom and dad and his brother or sister and the other 4 executives and their families, in theory, end up with a handful of reservations, which isn't necessarily a horrible thing. The problem you have, though, is that, it's probably something in the 3,000 to 5,000 vehicle zone that's necessary to embrace the tooling costs, etc., to build out that vehicle. So we were not surprised at the slim to none turnout for this vehicle that Nikola saw. There are a number of issues. Number one, they don't have a manufacturer yet. And the selection of manufacturers driven by they have to figure out how many of them they're going to make first before they're able to get contract manufacturing for those vehicles. So in the situation we're in now, it looks like the best case for that vehicle would likely be sort of hand-built one-off entities that in theory would be extremely expensive. So let's kind of look through the rest of the vehicle. The concept behind the vehicle is that they're actually doing both. It's a hybrid vehicle that does both electricity and a fuel cell within the same vehicle. In general, seems like a good concept. The biggest problem that we're seeing with this Badger pickup is the reason why Mr. Milton chose not to build cars to begin with, which is for 300 miles range of battery at its current battery cost, the 60,000 listed and 90,000 listed as the two prices for those vehicles. The 60,000 represents the exact amount that it would take just to purchase those batteries. So I think that what we're seeing is that they're attempting to do a delay process where if you delay long enough before the vehicle is delivered, you now have the cost of battery production declining, and they're able to build that vehicle somewhat in the price range described. But from our analysis, the $60,000 vehicle with 300 mile of range puts that vehicle in the 100,000 to 130 range, and the 90,000 vehicle is more like a $150,000 vehicle, and that's just electric. This is before we install anything associated with hydrogen. So the numbers I just gave you reflect the costs experienced by large manufacturers in competition, in particular the numbers VW and even GM are experiencing. And I bring up those issues because the problem right now that's happening is that if the net cost for the vehicle is for, let's say, VW, because they're already using a chassis or a body from another Audi vehicle to bring over VW, all those costs are extremely low because of the number of vehicles that they have running through from an economies of scale standpoint. If you have very small volume, your per unit cost is actually going to be very high. So the numbers I just gave you about the Badger represent what its cost would be if they were doing 10, 20, 30,000 vehicles a year. If they're down into the 1 to 5,000 zone, in theory, their cost should be at least 25% higher, if not 50% higher than those numbers. So the thought there is hopefully they can get more out of it. The other problem that I see happening here with the vehicle is, what are we going to do about the fact that there's a concentrated source for hydrogen in California because of what Toyota's done with the Mirai and its truck, but there are limited access points to hydrogen throughout the country. So, and there isn't enough demand for that hydrogen for them to actually build new facilities. So until his truck starts doing well, the hydrogen half of those pickup trucks is really not viable. So we think that basically what's going on right now is that given the low numbers of orders, there's a low chance that they can afford to actually build the vehicle. Now, I'd have to say that we were very surprised by the introduction of the Badger truck. And the reason is, if you watch the videos of Mr. Milton, what you'll notice is that he has some extensive discussions about the fact that they would not be building car-sized vehicles or smaller vehicles because all of the profit is lurking in trucks. So what he reviewed in essence is that the reason when they went public, that they got public, is they articulated the fact that they're the only pure play, clean semi-truck company in the world. And so I was a bit surprised to learn about the Badger, because if you're hyping up the fact that you're a pure play on the clean semi-trucks, and then you introduce a non-semi-truck, it makes you not a pure play electric semi-truck anymore company. You're trying to do both. And so as this vehicle has been introduced, it has introduced a number of problems that are the reasons why he didn't want to get into the business to begin with. So I wanted to sort of switch over here to the fact that one of the other issues that we raised in a previous show was something that's called usable market. So when you look at Tesla, what's actually happened is that the lower the price of car, the larger the number of consumers that can afford it. So the Model 3 is a critical vehicle in Tesla's line because the tipping point between, in essence, starting at about $70,000, every time you drop the price of the vehicle by about 15K, you gain 1 million potential customers, all the way down to, at this point, the lowest price Model 3 is about $35,000 to $37,000. So when you have vehicles that are priced in that neighborhood, you now address half of the automobile market in the world, and therefore you can garner a lot of sales, etc. And then you add in features like the supercharging stations and other things that Tesla does, and it really amplifies why the company is successful. In the case of Nikola, there's this challenge there where, in the absence of any kind of refueling stations for the semis to begin with, and then none for the pickups, that's an issue. And it seems as though they've been able to identify corporate customers who are willing to live with the semi situation and the hydrogen. But I was intrigued by the fact that Mr. Milton noted that instead of customers having to deal with the high cost, i.e. $400,000-ish per vehicle, what they were doing is simply blending fuel costs and other consumables into this number of 95 cents per mile. And so now the vehicle is really just a lease, and the company pays this per mile fee. Now, the beauty of what they decided to do is that by having this per mile fee that they're doing, they now increase what their overall revenue is without necessarily having to go out and find new customers. And it helps them to get to their economies of scale goal that make up for that help address costs related to building a plant to build these vehicles. So I think it's an interesting strategy. The marketplace obviously has accepted it, and therefore they have a small firm and they have a big market cap related to what they stated they were going to do. The one other point I wanted to bring up here that Mr. Milton mentioned that I think is important is the fact that he highlighted the fact that electric still has the competitive advantage in the short haul, 100, 150 miles, whatever it might be. As soon as you go over into those longer ranges, you now have the benefit of that long range sort of going to hydrogen, and this might be a reason why customers might choose to do it. As we shared from Ms. Woods, the challenge, though, is that when you're 3 or 4 times the cost of electricity for your hydrogen, and you're using electricity anyway to make that hydrogen, it makes it a hard use case. The one other thing I wanted to bring up today is that one of the signs to us that there was a non-viability of what had been presented by Nikola is that there's recently, as in this morning or yesterday, an announcement that Nikola had now started discounting prices on those vehicles, in essence giving higher line elements to the vehicle that was being sold. And so, it looks like there's a little bit of desperation that's already going on, and we're barely starting. So I have to say that I'm not surprised that this is happening. I think consumers are a lot more concerned about bottom line numbers than large corporations are in terms of operating costs. I really think that I was very surprised that Nikola elected to introduce the vehicle in the way they did. For example, in the case of the truck, they had, I don't know if it was working, but they had a prototype sitting on the grounds that people could step into, etc. And in theory, there's a dispute right now in court about whether or not the thing was able to move. But the big challenge that lurks here is that it's unknown whether or not, the truck that we're seeing photos of is actually in motion, able to move on its own power, etc. And we believe that that's influencing whether or not consumers are willing to put up their $5,000. We're going to cover this sort of in our next show, because it's often hard to pin down what exactly corporate strategy is for Nikola, because what we've noticed is that depending on the day and the product, corporate strategy has changed. So we kind of reviewed it today in that he indicated that there would not be a smaller vehicle because the profit margins were so small, and then he introduced a smaller vehicle. So that's one of many changes that Nikola has done. Another one of them is they actually took deposits on their initial electric trucks, and then they indicated they didn't need the money and returned the money to the depositors and indicated that those depositors could abandon their reservations at any time, and they didn't have a deposit for it. So at that time, the goal was to differentiate themselves from the process that Tesla was using for reservations for the Semi. And, I just meant they had less capital sitting on the balance sheet to work with to try to get to their goals. But given the IPO, I guess it's not a big deal. So we're intrigued here. I want to note also that, there are a lot of smart people here, both within Nikola and within the market. And if there are companies and institutions paying up to acquire shares in Nikola, we're not going to say you can't do that. I have to say that, like, I have a company right now with small revenue in the software space that's actually growing pretty quickly, impacted by COVID and some of the things the software can do. And what I'm impressed by is the number of companies without revenue or profit that are public, and the public space is willing to work on it. So I lean towards being a value investor. So I want to see, revenue. I want to see buildings. I want to see scientists doing work. All these things that I want to see. But if there are people that don't want to see those, the type of investor they are is different, and they can make money just like the people in the value space that I'm in. So I've actually lost some friends on here and subscribers because I made a comment where I said, don't hate the player, hate the game. And what I mean by that is that if in fact Mr. Milton is building a product or products, and there are individuals who've done their homework that are fairly sophisticated, that are confident in his ability to get it done, based on all the representations he's made, then it's none of my business whether or not they put their money into it. And you could argue that there actually been entities out there that did not garner strong market support that ended up being very successful. I mean, Amazon.bomb is one of the I have a friend who said that to me every day for a year or two. And Amazon is now a successful company, but it was called Amazon.bomb for a while. And it was the right of whoever invested in it to invest as they did and succeed or not succeed on their own terms without, with their own money out there, they're voting with their feet and their money, and that was fine. So I'm, we're continuing to do our updates on Nikola and what's going on. I would say that right now, I'm surprised they're making the Badger effort. I'm actually surprised that they did not offer rides in the vehicle combined with a prototype people can touch prior to asking for deposits. I found that very strange because this was a formula that got them the reservations for the trucks that they have. So we'll see how this plays out. The one last piece of surprise for me is pickup trucks tend to be sort of etch-a-sketch, meaning that, there's a lot of pieces and parts that are changed and can be changed. And so if you have a basic truck, you can sort of build up from there to get a product that folks might buy. And it's just very strange to have them not make this effort, given that they're already familiar with the prototype process on trucks. And there are potentially a large number of pickup truck buyers that, would make up for, any costs, et cetera, especially when you look at all the deposits that would come in. So I'd have to say that, Nikola is a mystery. we're happy to pitch in some ideas, once a week, once every other week about what's going on, particularly as we have new news. And we actually look forward to your comments on it as well. Just a reminder, don't forget your 25 legless a day. Also, try the 5-2 or another diet. I also want to encourage you at 30 SPF or better if you're going to be in the sun to avoid sunburn. And we also want to encourage you to do a couple of weightlifting sessions a week as a way to strengthen yourself to improve bone density. At any rate, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss German, au revoir French, Lehitro, Hebrew, Hoda Hafez, Farsi, Hey Do Swedish, Zdravstvuyte, hello in Russian, Ni hao ma, hello in Chinese, and in Jamaica we say, no respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us and have a great day, and bye for now.